Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my February wrap-up, and I have to say I'm feeling pretty good about my reading in February. I think things are looking up as we're moving into March, but I think this is going to be pretty short and sweet because I have actually talked about 4 of these 5 books in other videos. I will also point you in the direction of the vlogs that I read them in if you want more in-depth thoughts on any of these. But the very first thing I ended up reading this month was Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fato, and this was such a fun ride. This one I had an arc for, and I'd kind of requested it on a whim because I saw Stephen Graham Jones posting about it on Blue Sky and saying it was a really fantastic book. So on a whim, requested it, somehow managed to get it despite my ratio being kind of middling to okay. But I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I got a chance to read this because it was a ton of fun. This one we're following Winifred Naughty, who is a governess, and she's just been assigned, or not assigned, but like hired by a new family, and she's arriving at their estate at the beginning of the book. And it seems like she has some sort of an ulterior motive, but we don't really know what that is until quite a ways into the story. But as she arrives, she's meeting the other members of this family. It's the Poundses, the husband and wife, who are kind of a dysfunctional family, and then their 2 little kids, Andrew and Drusilla, I think are their names, and they're kind of weird in their own respects. But we end up with this group of people, including Winifred, who are all just kind of strange, and it's sort of these little vignettes of Winifred's time with the family as she's getting to know each of them, where she's kind of commenting on their behaviors and looking at like why they do what they do as a result of their positions in society and the ways that other people treat them. And it's like lots of weird things happening, but everybody in the book is so weird that really the characters don't react to it, and it's more put on the reader to react to those things. And I think it's interesting the way it's positioning you as a reader, and it's using that to kind of comment on society, which I think is really cool. That said, I think when I got to the end of this, I had this feeling that I kind of had missed something in there. There was some message maybe under the surface that I had not picked up on, because I got to the end and I was a little confused on what I was supposed to have gotten out of the story, but this was just a like fun, gory time. That said, it is, as I just said, very gory, so be aware of that going in. There's also quite a bit of child murder, so be aware. I think this one is interesting and worth picking up, but if you don't like to read about those things, I don't think this one is going to be for you. The next 3 books I read for the Jante's Inferno readathon, which was a ton of fun. I think I did way better this year than I did previously. I think last year I didn't even manage to finish 1 book, and this year I managed to read 3 and read through, I think, the 5th Circle of Hell, so made a pretty good bit of progress. The first thing I read for this, though, was Haunt Sweet Home by Sarah Pinsker, which unfortunately was pretty disappointing for me. I was really excited about this novella, and I listened to the audiobook, and ultimately I was kind of unimpressed. This is about a young woman who feels very at odds with her family. Her family's kind of successful in a lot of ways, like various people in her family have some sort of skill that they're really good at. They had something that they wanted to go for, and they've kind of achieved becoming like a really skilled musician or a really skilled carver or an actor. Like, they're successful in ways that she feels like she's not capable of being, and she, as a result of that, is kind of drifting through life. And at the very start of the story, she gets an opportunity to become a night production assistant on the TV show that her cousin works on, and joins them as they are essentially faking hauntings at these old homes that are being renovated by the project team. So she's involved in that, and then it starts to look like maybe there's a real haunting taking place, and that's all I can really tell you without starting to spoil the story. But I don't know that there's that much to spoil because I didn't really feel like there was a good connection between the plot and the themes it was trying to talk about. I didn't get how the haunting connected to our main character's kind of sense of purposelessness and her feeling that everybody else around her is better at being an adult than she is. So I didn't get the connection there. I didn't think it worked, and I think the pacing in this was pretty poor. It's a horror book, but basically nothing happens until like almost the 50% mark. There's not even really a lot of setup. It's just these like little bits and pieces about the job that she's doing, but we don't really get any of the kind of building tension that I would have wanted from a horror book, especially one that's as short as this one is. I listened to this one on audio, and it's about 4 hours. It's just like a 150-page novella or something along those lines, and so it's a pretty short book. In fact, I think it's less pages than that. But the audiobook, very short, and also not very good, I thought, as well. I think that the narrator for the audiobook had this kind of disaffected teenager feel to her voice, the way that she was intonating everything just felt kind of like she was bored, and I didn't think that matched well with the character that we were following. Also found it kind of annoying to listen to, but I did make it through, and I ended up giving this one 2.5 stars. So I'm not sure I would say this is worth your time, but if the premise is interesting to you, maybe you'd want to pick it up and give it a try, because you may still enjoy it more than I did. I have seen some positive reviews of it, so I think this is a case of the book just not meshing well with me. After that, I picked up a book I enjoyed a lot more, which is A Single Bright Candle's Flame by Cole McCade, which is the 8th or 9th book in the Criminal Intention series. I can't really tell you much about the plot because it is following on the end of the previous book, and it's quite a ways into the series, but the general gist of this book is that it is following these two characters as they're dealing with the emotional fallout of a thing that happened in the previous book. They're homicide detectives. There's an officer involved shooting in the earlier book. You can probably put 2 and 2 together and kind of figure out what's happened here, but all of that aside, it's been about them dealing with that kind of emotional fallout and figuring out how to move forward with their jobs and their lives and their relationship from there. The series is also kind of a romance. I really enjoy this series. It's a lot of fun. This particular book feels a little bit like a filler episode because we get a little bit of plot, like overarching plot at the very beginning and a little bit at the very end, and the middle bit is just kind of our main characters hanging out doing things and having like these little domestic moments, which is really sweet. It just made it feel a little bit like a filler episode. So I am giving this one 4 stars. I did have a really good time with it, but I kind of wanted more on the overall plot of the book. I felt like this was just a little bit light on that. Then the last book I read for Jante's Inferno was A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the book that got me out of the 5th Circle of Hell, and this one is the sequel to The Tainted Cup, which I read last year and absolutely loved. This was another arc that I had, and I really enjoyed this one. I think it's even better than the previous book in the series. This one we're following our 2 main characters, Anna and Din, as they're going to a new place called Yarrow that's in a region that isn't officially part of the empire that they work for, but is sort of an imperial territory, but it's in the midst of becoming an official imperial canton. So it's in this very complicated political position and kind of moment in time as it's transitioning from being an independent kingdom to being a part of the empire. And in the middle of all of that, somebody goes missing, and that leads to a much larger conspiracy where it seems like whoever's behind it is 4 to 12 steps ahead of Anna and Din at every turn. I really enjoyed this. I think the plot's really fun. I think it did a really good job of laying out the clues so that you could follow along and feel like you were solving the mystery alongside our main characters. I think we learned some new interesting things about Anna in particular in this one. She is this really enigmatic detective figure who, she's kind of odd. She always walks around with a blindfold, and she just has some weird behaviors that are clearly connected to something, but you don't really know what. So we learn a lot more about her in this book. We also get some really big emotional notes for Din. He's kind of reeling from some things that happened in the first book. He also has family stuff going on, so there's this kind of undercurrent alongside the plot of these emotional difficulties that Din is going through, and I felt like that was handled really well. And I really just enjoyed the whole way that this played out. I like the new characters we get introduced to. It was just a ton of fun, and I had a great time reading it. I devoured it in a couple of days and just absolutely loved it, even more than the first book. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars as opposed to 5 stars, only because I think there's a few points where it doesn't feel like the book trusts the reader to remember pieces of information and understand their importance, and it felt a little bit like we were just hammering on the same points over and over again. But it only happens in a few spots. Ultimately, it didn't really dent my enjoyment of the book that much. I just felt like the book didn't totally trust me to get what was going on. That said, I still, again, absolutely loved it and would highly, highly recommend the series if you like fantasy murder mysteries. I think this is a really good version of that. The last book I read was The Service Barrier by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This was my nonfiction for the month, and I really enjoyed this one as well. This was my first 5-star of the year. I think that Dr. Kimmerer's writing is just beautiful. She's really good at engaging you with difficult topics because her writing is so poetic but also accessible. So it really just kind of dragged me in, kept my attention. This book, she's kind of exploring the ideas of gift economies and mutual flourishing and the ways that nature provides examples for us to follow in terms of resisting capitalism. There are other ways of being, other ways of building networks that we see in nature that we can emulate as people to try and resist some of the excess and destruction associated with capitalism, which I found in this particular moment to be a pretty hopeful topic and a pretty hopeful tone overall. I think that the ideas she's exploring in here are really interesting, and she does a great job of breaking down big ideas and making them easy to understand for people who aren't necessarily familiar with the specific fields that she's talking about, because this book very much sits at the intersection of ecology, economics, and anthropology, so there's kind of a lot going on, but there was never a moment where I felt lost or I didn't understand what she was saying, because she does a great job of explaining everything. So having read this, I really am interested to go back and read some of her other work. I know Braiding Sweetgrass is a beloved nonfiction book, so I think I want to read that one next. But yeah, I'm really glad that I took the time to read this one. It was a really easy read, and I feel like I got a lot out of it, and I suspect I'll be returning to it from time to time to get more out of it, because it just has so much in it for how short it is. It's a very small book, but there's just so much interesting thought there that I'm excited to go back and learn more from it. So those are all the books that I read in February. Let me know down in the comments below what your favorite book was that you read in February, and I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, I hope you consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!